Usually we're here breaking down hard data or digging into historical timelines. But today we're stepping into something deeply intimate. We're looking at a deeply emotional story that honestly just defies logic. It challenges our entire understanding of reality and touches on the very edge of human grief and love. So I want you to just settle in, keep an open mind, and prepare to walk through an experience with us that is, well, it's as beautiful as it is chilling.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just take a second to process the sheer weight of that statement. This is literally the unbelievable contradiction at the absolute center of our story today. I mean, think about it. How can you be looking right at someone, speaking directly to them, and simultaneously receive a phone call declaring that they've died? It doesn't make sense, right? To understand how we actually arrive at this impossible moment, we've got to rewind a bit and look at the events that led up to that fateful night.
Now, the foundation of this story isn't supernatural at all. It's actually profoundly human. She and her boyfriend had been together for 3 deeply committed years. In fact, he just recently proposed, and they were actively making wedding plans. They were literally building a life together. But as things happen, that afternoon, a crack formed in their foundation. She ended up discovering a message on his phone from an ex-girlfriend. And, this sparked a jealous, incredibly painful argument that would ultimately change the course of both of their lives forever. In a real moment of hurt and pride, she delivered this ultimatum. She practically ended the relationship right there on the spot, telling him she needed time and space. And despite him pleading with her, he was insisting she was the woman of his dreams, begging her to just sit down and talk it out. She held firm. Her vulnerability was completely masked by her pride. And honestly, it's a remarkably common human reaction. We've all been there. But in the context of what happens next, well, this argument becomes a seriously heavy burden. So as the evening progressed, the distance between them kind of just grew. At around 9 p.m., she checked her phone and saw an update on his status. He was out drinking. Seeing this obviously prompted her to text him, which naturally led right into another minor argument over the phone. But during this exchange, he asked if he could come over to her house to talk things through in person. She was pretty resistant at first, still guarding that pride, but eventually, albeit reluctantly, she agreed to let him come over. Well, the hours kept ticking by. By 11 p.m., he still hadn't arrived. And worst of all, had completely stopped answering her calls. The silence was just heavy. But then, all of a sudden, a sound broke through the quiet of the night. It was the sound of tiny pebbles gently hitting her bedroom window. Now, this wasn't just some random noise. This was their specific, intimate signal. It was his signature way of letting her know he was waiting outside. So she goes to the window, and there he is, sitting on his motorcycle right outside her house without his helmet on. He's just looking up at her and smiling. He spoke those words to her, asking for forgiveness, totally refusing to let the day end on a bitter note. And as she stood there looking down at him, she describes feeling completely torn between holding onto her stubborn pride and this overwhelming, intense urge to just run outside and hug him. And then the world just completely stops. While she is standing at the window, looking directly at the man she loves, her phone rings. It's an unknown number. On the other end of the line, a stranger's voice informs her that she's listed as the emergency contact for a man who has just been in a terrible motorcycle crash. The caller tells her that the owner of the wallet they found at the scene has passed away. The surreal horror of this exact moment is honestly difficult to even comprehend. She's holding the phone to her ear, listening to this grim report, all while staring right at her boyfriend. She actually responds to the caller saying, "You must be joking. That's impossible. He's literally right here." The inspector on the phone logically concludes that someone else must have stolen or borrowed his documents. Relieved by that logical explanation, she asks for the address of the accident, looks down at her boyfriend at the window and tells him, "Imagine that someone got into an accident with your papers." Now, what's really interesting here is that in that exact micro moment, reality completely shifts. When she tells him about the accident, he doesn't speak. His smile simply fades away and he lowers his gaze, just looking down at the ground. Still holding her phone, she asks the inspector for the license plate number of the crashed motorcycle just to confirm the mix-up. She glances away for a fraction of a second, and when she looks back out the window, he is completely gone, literally vanished into thin air. Let's map out the terrifying impossibility of this timeline. We know from the official records that the fatal accident occurred at exactly 10:05 p.m. That means when she was calling him frantically and getting no answer, he had already passed away. Yet it wasn't until nearly an hour later at 11 p.m. that she heard the pebbles on her window. When he was looking up at her, smiling and asking for forgiveness, he had already been dead for 55 minutes. Just let that sink in. This is where her reality brutally collides with the cold, hard truth. Desperate to understand how he disappeared so quickly, she and her parents immediately reviewed the footage from their home security cameras. Her reality was incredibly vivid, her boyfriend on his bike, a full conversation, a shared gaze. But the objective reality of the security camera showed something entirely different. The footage showed only her, standing at the open window, talking to absolutely nothing. Down below, there was no motorcycle, no boyfriend, only an empty street and a vague shadow. Thrown into a state of utter shock, she moved methodically through what was basically a waking nightmare. She woke her parents in an absolute panic. They checked that baffling camera footage together. Then, bracing themselves for the absolute worst, they drove to the address the inspector had given her over the phone. By the time they arrived at the crash site, his body had already been moved. All that was really left to do was the grim administrative task of receiving his personal effects from the authorities. The police handed over the heavy, undeniable reality of his death: his cell phone, his fanny pack containing his IDs, his bracelet, his rings, his chain, his glasses, and crucially, his helmet. Remember that image at the window? He didn't have his helmet on. He couldn't have been at her house. The physical evidence proved without a shadow of a doubt that everything he owned and his physical body were miles away at the scene of the crash. The following hours brought the devastating confirmation that no one ever wants. She had to call his family. His mother was shown photos to officially recognize him. And through it all, the narrator just kept repeating her truth. But he was just at my house. He spoke to me. Ultimately, at the funeral, she saw him with her own eyes, fully confirming the harsh reality. Alongside her immense grief, she carried this crushing weight of guilt, agonizing over the fact that their final hours on Earth together were spent arguing over a text message. In the face of that immense guilt, her parents offered her these comforting words. They gently reminded her that we really cannot control destiny. What's meant to happen, happens. Friends and family whispered about the completely inexplicable event at the window. Some theorized that his love for her was so incredibly strong that he used his final spark of energy to cross over, simply to say goodbye. Others firmly believed his soul was just in shock, completely unaware that his body had died, and he was just following his last living intention, which was to go to her house and apologize. Science and security cameras tell us the driveway was entirely empty. Yet her heart swears the man she loved was right there, asking for her forgiveness. So the crucial point here is that it leaves us with a haunting, totally unanswerable question, a question she continues to carry with her for the rest of her life. Who was actually in front of her that night? Was it a hallucination born out of severe anxiety and guilt? Was it some sort of bizarre glitch in time? Or is human connection so profoundly deep that it can temporarily bridge the gap between the living and the dead, even if it's just long enough to offer a final apology? Who did she really talk to? We may never actually have an answer to that. But as you carry this incredible story with you, I invite you to really consider the enduring power of a final goodbye, and just how much of our reality remains safely hidden right beyond what we can easily see.